The great council chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls made of pure light that shifted colors with the emotions of those who spoke. Today, those walls pulsed deep red with fear and desperation. Ambassador Lyrathes stood at the center, her crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the floor. She was beautiful in the way her people always were, but today that beauty was cracked with grief. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice carrying the musical tone of her species. I come before you not as a diplomat but as a survivor. My people are dying. The holographic display behind her flickered to life, showing star maps of the Zephyrian Confederation. 23 star systems home to billions of peaceful beings marked in blue. But as the council watched, those blue dots began turning red one by one. The Korth hegemony moves through our space like a plague, Lyrathes continued. They do not conquer. They do not enslave. They simply kill. Every man, woman, and child. Every creature that breathes. They leave nothing but empty worlds behind. Council member Velthar of the Aquatic Federation raised a webbed hand. Ambassador, we have sent 3 peacekeeping fleets to assist your people. Surely, all destroyed, Lyrathes cut him off, something she had never done before in 20 years of diplomatic service. The Korth bioweapons turn our own ships against us. Their hive mind tactics overwhelm our commanders. They adapt faster than we can respond. She pressed a control and the display showed footage from the last battle. Ships that looked like living creatures. Their hulls pulsing with biomechanical parts tore through the peaceful Alliance fleet like sharks through fish. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. How many worlds have fallen? Asked Counselor Thren, her insectoid features twitching with concern. 15 systems are gone completely. 6 more are under attack. Only 2 remain free and they will not last the week. Lyrathes paused, her crystalline form dimming with exhaustion. We estimate 43 billion souls have been lost. The number hung in the air like a weight. 43 billion, more than the total population of some member species. What do you ask of us? Velthar inquired, though they all knew the answer. Military intervention. A full battle fleet. Something strong enough to match the Korth. Lyrathes looked around the chamber at faces that were already shaking in denial. The Galactic Treaty forbids military action without unanimous consent, Counselor Thren reminded her. The Pacifist Alliance will never agree to such violence. Then let my people vote on it, came a new voice from the gallery. Representatives of a dozen peaceful species stood together, their spokesman a tall, thin being with gray skin. We would rather die in battle than watch our children eaten alive. But the council had heard this before. The debate began as it always did, with procedure and protocol. Hours passed as Lyrathes stood in the center, watching her people die while politicians argued about proper paperwork. Finally, when the third day of debate began with no progress, old archivist Mothron spoke up. The ancient keeper of galactic records rarely addressed the council, preferring his dusty archives to politics. There is another option, he said in his creaky voice. I have been reviewing old database entries, looking for any species we might have missed. We have contacted every member of the Alliance, Velthar said impatiently. Not every sapient species is a member, Mothran replied. There is an entry here filed under unconfirmed reports, a species that achieved spaceflight despite living on a Class 12 death world. The chamber fell silent. Class 12 death worlds were considered uninhabitable, planets where everything from the weather to the smallest microbe actively tried to kill anything that lived there. That's impossible, Counselor Thren said. No intelligence could evolve under such conditions. The entry is old, but the coordinates are valid. Sol 3 in the Outer Rim. The species calls itself humans. Most of the council members made sounds of disbelief. A few laughed outright. But Lyrathes felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. What do we know about them? She asked. Mothran consulted his records. Very little. The initial contact probe reported tool use, agriculture, and what appeared to be organized warfare. But that was over 2 centuries ago. The follow-up mission was canceled when the sector was classified as non-strategic. Warfare? Lyrathes seized on the word. Her people had barely understood the concept before the Korth arrived. According to the probe, they appeared to be fighting each other, multiple tribal groups all armed with primitive weapons. Mothran paused. The probe noted that despite constant conflict, their population continued to grow. They fight and still thrive? She could barely understand it. When the peaceful species had conflicts, they talked for years until everyone agreed. The idea of growth through struggle was alien to them. It's probably nothing, Velthar said dismissively. Even if they still exist, what could primitives do against the Korth? But Lyra Thess was already moving toward the communications array. I will send a message. If they respond, we lose nothing. If they do not, she did not finish the sentence. They all knew what happened if help did not come. The message was simple. A basic mathematical sequence to prove intelligence followed by star charts showing the Korth advance and finally a plea. Our people are dying. We need help. Please respond if you can assist. She transmitted it toward the Sol system and waited. The council dispersed, most members convinced they had just witnessed the desperate act of a doomed species. Only Mothrin remained, staring at his archives with a strange expression. What troubles you, old friend? Laerithess asked. I found another entry while searching, he said slowly. A trader's report from 50 years ago. He claimed to have detected artificial structures in the Sol system. Not just on the Death World, but on multiple planets and moons, and in space itself. You think they achieved advanced technology? I think, Mothrin said carefully, that any species that could survive on a Class 12 Death World might have developed very different ideas about survival than we have. The reply came 18 hours later. Lyra Thess was awakened by emergency alarms throughout the diplomatic station. She rushed to the communications center expecting news of another fallen world. Instead, she found technicians staring at their screens in confusion. Ambassador, the chief operator said, we're receiving a transmission from the Sol system. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike any they had seen. It stood upright on two legs, with pale skin stretched over what looked like an internal skeleton. No scales, no chitin, no crystalline structure, just soft, vulnerable flesh. Its eyes were small and dark, set in a face that seemed designed for expressing emotions rather than processing information. But those eyes had seen things. Message received, the creature said in heavily accented but understandable galactic standard. Fleet en route. Estimated arrival, 72 standard hours. The transmission ended. Lyratha stared at the blank screen, feeling a chill run through her crystalline body. The being had not asked for details about the enemy, had not requested tactical information or strategic briefings, had not even asked what kind of help was needed. It had simply said a fleet was coming. From a death world where everything tried to kill everything else, help was finally on the way. She only hoped they had not invited something worse than the Korth. The space around Zephyros Prime had been peaceful for 3 days. It was the kind of peace that came before storms, when even the solar winds seemed to hold their breath. Ambassador Lyra Thess floated in the observation deck of the orbital station, watching the stars and trying not to think about what was coming. Behind her, Admiral Kethmore of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet paced nervously. His forearms gestured as he spoke, a habit that showed his anxiety. I still think this is madness, he said for the 100th time. We know nothing about these humans. What if they are worse than the Korth? Then we die by different claws, Lyrathess replied simply. At least we will have tried. The early warning sensors had been screaming for an hour. Something big was coming through hyperspace. Something that made their instruments go crazy with readings they could not understand. Every ship in the system was on alert, though their weapons would be useless if the newcomers proved hostile. Hyperspace rupture detected, the sensor operator announced. Multiple contacts emerging at Grid 77 Alpha. The main screen showed empty space, then began to fill with contacts. First 1, then 5, then 20. The numbers kept climbing until the display showed over 200 ships materializing from the void. But these were not ships like anything in the galactic database. Where Zephyrian vessels were elegant curves of crystalline light, where even Korth bioships maintained organic beauty. The human fleet looked like it had been forged in the heart of a star and beaten into shape with hammers. The ships were angular wedges of dark metal, their hulls covered in armor plating that spoke of battles fought and survived. No decorative elements, no artistic flourishes. Every line served a purpose, and that purpose was clearly violence. Weapon ports dotted their surfaces like angry eyes, and energy readings suggested power cores that ran far hotter than any civilized species would consider safe. By the Crystal Throne, Admiral Kethmore whispered, those ships look like they were designed to fight each other. That is exactly what I am afraid of, Lyra Thess murmured. The largest ship moved forward from the fleet formation. It was a massive dreadnought that dwarfed anything in Zephyrian space, its hull scarred and patched in places that told stories of battles survived. As it approached, communications crackled to life. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force, aboard the battleship Indomitable. We are responding to your request for assistance." The face that appeared on screen made several Zephyrian officers step backward. The human female had skin marked with scars, evidence of a life lived in conflict. Her hair was pulled back severely and her uniform was practical rather than decorative. But it was her eyes that unsettled them most. They were the eyes of a predator, cold and calculating yet holding depths of intelligence that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Welcome to Zephyrian space, Admiral Chen," Lyrithus managed. "We are grateful for your response, though we must admit we are surprised by the size of your fleet." A smile crossed the human's face, and it was not entirely reassuring. "When we heard about your problem, we decided not to take any chances. We brought enough firepower to handle whatever these Korth might throw at us." Admiral Kethmore found his voice. "Our intelligence suggests the Korth have over 500 ships in the assault fleet." 500? Admiral Chen seemed almost amused. "That's a decent start. Where are they now?" "Currently attacking the Bellis system 2 jumps from here. Admiral, I must warn you, their bioweapons are effective against species that do not understand biological warfare," Chen interrupted. "We have been fighting biological weapons for longer than your species has had spaceflight. Where we come from, everything wants to kill you and half of it is too small to see." She turned to someone off-screen. "Commander Martinez, prepare the fleet for immediate jump to Bellis. Full combat deployment." "Admiral," Lyrithus said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss strategy first. Coordinate with our remaining forces." The human's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she looked almost kind. "Ambassador, with respect, we have reviewed your tactical reports. Your people fight like they are trying to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. That is admirable. But it will not work against an enemy that wants to exterminate you. What do you suggest?" "We fight like humans." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Zephyrians to follow in their wake. When they emerged at Bellis, the battle was already underway. Korth bioships swarmed around the planet like insects, their living hulls pulsing as they deployed bioweapons against the few remaining defenders. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the Bellis Massacre, though scholars would argue for centuries about who had actually been massacred. The human ships did not form up in traditional battle lines. Instead, they scattered through the Korth formation like hunters surrounding prey. Their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Not energy beams or projectile cannons, but devices that seemed to tear space itself apart. A Korth biocruiser found itself facing the human destroyer Relentless. The bioship launched its standard attack pattern, releasing clouds of nano-organisms designed to eat through enemy hulls. The human ship simply flew through the cloud, its hull apparently immune to the biological attack. Then the Relentless opened fire. The weapon looked like concentrated lightning, but it did not simply burn through the bioship's hull. Instead, it seemed to rewrite the bioship's very structure, turning its own living tissue against itself. Within seconds, the Korth vessel was consuming itself from the inside out. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships moved through Korth formations like wolves through sheep, their weapons turning the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Bioweapons designed to adapt and evolve found themselves facing countermeasures that adapted faster. But it was not just the technology that shocked the Zephyrian observers. It was the tactics. Where civilized species fought with honor and restraint, the humans fought to win. They used the Korth's hive mind against them, broadcasting signals that disrupted their coordination. They turned captured bioships into weapons, programming them to attack their former allies. They showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and offered no quarter. Within 3 hours, the entire Korth assault fleet was destroyed. Admiral Chen's face reappeared on the Zephyrian communications channel. Behind her, the bridge crew worked with efficient precision, their movements speaking of a lifetime of warfare. "Bellis system is secure," she reported. "We are detecting Korth retreat signals from surrounding systems. They appear to be falling back to regroup." "Admiral," Lyrithus said slowly, "your methods, they are very different from ours." "Yes," Chen replied simply. "Your methods preserve honor and minimize suffering. Our methods preserve lives and maximize survival. When your children are being eaten alive, which do you prefer? The question hung in space between them unanswered because they all knew the answer. What happens now? Admiral Kethmore asked. Now we hunt, Chen said. The Korth made the mistake of threatening a species under Terran protection. We will find their homeworlds, their breeding centers, their command structures, and we will show them why it is a bad idea to pick fights with Deathworlders. As the human fleet regrouped and prepared to advance deeper into Korth space, Lyra Thess found herself watching the tactical displays with growing unease. The humans had saved Bellis, yes. They had shown power beyond imagination. But as she watched their ships move with predatory grace through the debris of the Korth fleet, she began to understand what her people had truly called down upon the galaxy. They had asked for salvation, and it had come in the form of controlled chaos. They had begged for protection, and received it from beings who understood violence as an art form. The question that would haunt her dreams was simple. When the Korth were gone, what would these Deathworlders do next? The Korth hive ship Devourer had ruled space for 3 centuries. Its biomechanical hull stretched for kilometers, a living fortress that had never known defeat. Inside its neural corridors, the collective consciousness of 10,000 Korth warriors pulsed with shared thought and purpose. Today that purpose was fear. Captain Marcus Reed of the human assault ship. Havoc studied the Devourer through his helmet display as his boarding pod cut through space toward the enemy vessel. Around him, 23 other pods followed the same trajectory, their stealth systems hiding them from Korth sensors until it was too late. Remember, people, Reed's voice crackled through the communication system. These things think as one. Hit their neural nodes hard and fast. Break their connection to each other. The pods struck the Devourer's hull like bullets, their cutting charges burning through bioarmor that could resist most weapons. Within seconds, human marines were pouring into the ship's corridors, moving with deadly purpose through spaces designed for creatures twice their size. Reed's team advanced through the neural pathways, following maps created by Dr. Elena Vasquez's xenobiology unit. The corridors pulsed with bioluminescent signals, the ship's nervous system carrying panic messages throughout the vessel. Neural cluster ahead, Sergeant Williams reported, her rifle tracking targets that had not yet appeared. I can hear them thinking. The Korth defenders came around the corner in perfect formation, their chitinous bodies gleaming under the biolights. They moved as one organism, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns that should have overwhelmed any boarding party. But the humans had studied hive mind tactics for months. Reed's team scattered into pre-planned positions, using the ship's own architecture against its defenders. Where the Korth expected unity, they found chaos. Where they expected predictable tactics, they encountered adaptive strategies that changed faster than their collective consciousness could process. Reed planted his neural disruptor against the wall and activated it. The device was Dr. Vasquez's latest creation, designed specifically to exploit Korth biology. Instead of simply jamming their communications, it introduced false signals into their network. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Korth defenders began firing on each other, their shared consciousness unable to distinguish between true and false signals. Their perfect coordination collapsed into confused panic. Beautiful work, Doc, Reed muttered as he advanced through the chaos. Remind me to buy you a drink when we get home. 3 decks below, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked in her mobile laboratory, surrounded by captured Korth biotechnology and the controlled chaos of accelerated research. Her team had been modifying enemy systems in real time, turning the Korth's greatest weapons against them. The reproduction virus is ready for deployment, announced her assistant, Dr. Park. Are you sure about this? It seems horrible, immoral, against every law of civilized warfare. Vasquez looked up from her microscope, her eyes red from exhaustion. Yes, it is. It is also necessary. The virus was elegant in its cruelty. It would spread through Korth breeding facilities, not killing the young but modifying them. Instead of being born into the hive mind, they would emerge as individuals, capable of independent thought but unable to connect to their collective consciousness. They will be outcasts in their own society, Dr. Park observed. They will be alive, Vasquez replied, which is more than they were planning for our children. She loaded the virus into delivery drones that would spread it through Korth space, It was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated, designed not just to defeat the enemy, but to fundamentally change their nature. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as reports flooded in from across the battlefield. Human forces were achieving impossible victories, not through superior numbers or technology, but through tactics that no civilized species would consider. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving protests from the Zephyrian fleet. They're demanding we cease our excessive measures and return to conventional warfare." Chen almost smiled. Conventional warfare was what had gotten the Zephyrians exterminated. "Put Ambassador Lyrathus through." The crystalline being's image appeared on screen, her translucent features flickering with distress. "Admiral Chen, my government is deeply concerned about your methods. The use of biological weapons, the targeting of civilian infrastructure, the cruelty of your attacks." "Are they effective?" Chen asked simply. "That is not the point. There are laws of war, standards of civilized conduct." "Ambassador," Chen interrupted, "how many of your people died while following those laws?" The question stopped Lyrathus cold. They both knew the answer. 43 billion souls lost, because civilized warfare was not designed to fight an enemy that wanted complete extermination. "Your methods turn us into monsters," the ambassador said quietly. "No," Chen replied. "Our methods turn you into survivors. There is a difference." She terminated the connection and turned back to the tactical display. The Korth were retreating. Across 3 sectors, their fleets abandoning worlds they had held for decades. Human psychological warfare was spreading panic through their ranks faster than any physical weapon could. "Admiral," her tactical officer announced, "we're detecting massive troop movements in Korth space. It looks like they're pulling back to defend their core worlds." "Good. Let them consolidate their forces. It will make the final battle easier." But even as she said it, Chen knew the final battle would be the hardest. The Korth would make their last stand at their homeworlds, using every weapon and tactic at their disposal. They would fight with the desperation of a species facing extinction, and humanity would have to become even more monstrous to defeat them. In the medical bay of the Havoc, Captain Reed sat while a medic treated the wounds from his boarding action. The neural disruptor had worked perfectly, but fighting through a dying hive ship had taken its toll. "Captain," the medic said as she sealed a cut on his arm, "the Zephyrian doctors are asking to observe our treatment protocols. They say they want to understand how we heal so quickly from what should be fatal injuries." Reed considered this. Human medicine was designed around the assumption that everything was trying to kill you. Their healing techniques were aggressive, their painkillers were brutal, and their surgical methods would horrify most galactic species. "Tell them they can observe," he decided, "but warn them first. They might not like what they see." The truth was, humanity's entire approach to warfare came from their homeworld's basic requirement: adapt or die. They had spent millions of years learning to turn weaknesses into strengths, enemies into allies, and disasters into opportunities. Now they were teaching the galaxy the same lessons. On the Zephyrian diplomatic ship Harmony, Ambassador Lyrathus stood before a gathering of species representatives who had come to witness the human military intervention. Their faces showed the same mixture of gratitude and horror that she felt. "They are winning," observed Minister Telvar of the Peaceful Coalition. "In 3 weeks they have achieved what our combined fleets could not accomplish in 3 years." "At what cost?" asked Councillor Thren. "They fight without honor, without mercy. They use weapons that violate every treaty we have signed. They use weapons that work," Lyrathus said quietly, "and our children are alive because of it." The room fell silent. They all knew the reports from the liberated worlds. Human medical teams were saving lives that would have been lost to Korth bioweapons. Human engineers were rebuilding infrastructure that would have taken decades to repair. Human soldiers were standing guard over nurseries full of young ones who would grow up free. But they were also seeing videos of human combat techniques, reading reports of modified viruses and psychological warfare, witnessing the systematic breakdown of everything they thought they knew about civilized conflict. "What have we become?" Minister Telvar asked. Lyrithes looked out at the stars where human ships moved through space like angels of destruction, carrying hope and terror in equal measure. "We have become a species that will survive," she said. "Whether we remain civilized, that is a question for tomorrow. Tomorrow, when the Korth were gone and the humans turned their terrible efficiency toward whatever came next." The flagship Indomitable drifted in space above the ruins of Korth Prime, its hull scarred from the final battle. Inside, Ambassador Lyrithes walked through corridors that felt more like a tomb than a warship. The human crew moved quietly around her, their faces marked with an exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. Admiral Chen had agreed to give her a tour of the ship, though Lyrithes suspected the human leader had her own reasons for the invitation. They walked in silence through sections of the vessel she had never seen, past rooms that revealed the true nature of humanity's war machine. "This is our memorial hall," Chen said, stopping before a wall that stretched from floor to ceiling. Names were carved into the metal surface, thousands upon thousands of them, glowing with soft light. "Your war dead?" Lyrithes asked. "All war dead," Chen corrected. "Every species that died before we arrived. Every world that fell. Every child that was lost." She ran her fingers along the names, her touch gentle despite the calluses that marked her hands. "We don't fight for glory, Ambassador. We fight so that no more names have to be added to walls like this." Lyrithes studied the memorial, her crystalline form refracting the light into small rainbows. "I counted the names. There are more Zephyrian names here than human ones." "Of course there are. You lost 43 billion people. We lost 3,000 in the entire campaign. Then why do you mourn our dead as if they were your own?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "Because grief is the price of caring. And if we stop caring about lives we've never met, on worlds we'll never see, then we become the same as the Korth." They continued walking, deeper into the ship. The corridors here were different, more lived in. Personal items decorated the walls. Photographs of families, drawings by children, small mementos from 1,000 different worlds. "These are crew quarters," Chen explained. "Would you like to meet some of the people who saved your civilization?" The first cabin they entered belonged to Dr. Vasquez. The xenobiologist looked up from her work, her laboratory coat stained with substances Lyrithes could not identify. Around her, samples of Korth biotechnology sat in containment fields, being carefully studied and cataloged. "Ambassador," Dr. Vasquez said with a tired smile, "I hope you don't mind the mess. We're still processing everything we learned about Korth biology. The viruses you created," Lyrithes said carefully, "they were very effective." Vasquez's smile faded. "They were necessary, but that doesn't make them right." She gestured to the samples around her. "Do you know what the worst part is? The Korth are actually beautiful in their own way. Their biotechnology is elegant. Their reproductive cycles are perfectly adapted to their environment. Under other circumstances, we might have been friends. But they chose to be monsters," Chen observed. "No," Vasquez shook her head. "They chose to be what their evolution made them. Just like we chose to be what our evolution made us. The only difference is that our world taught us to protect other species, while theirs taught them to consume them." They left the doctor to her work and continued through the ship. In the engineering section, they met Chief Warrant Officer Jackson, whose team had reverse-engineered Korth technology in real time during battle. In the medical bay, they met Dr. Kim, who had developed treatments for bioweapon exposure that saved thousands of lives. Each person they met told the same story: ordinary beings pushed to extraordinary measures by the need to protect others. They were not heroes in the classical sense. They were simply people who had learned that sometimes protecting the innocent required becoming something monstrous. "I want to show you something else," Chen said as they reached the ship's observation deck. The chamber was dark, its windows showing the star field beyond. But it was not empty. Captain Reed sat in one of the chairs, staring out at the stars. His face was marked with fresh scars from the final boarding action, and his eyes held the distant look of someone who had seen too much. "Captain," Chen said gently, "how are you holding up?" Reed did not turn around. "I keep thinking about the Korth young we found on their breeding worlds. They looked at us with such fear, and we destroyed them anyway." "They would have grown up to be killers," Chen said. "Yes," Reed agreed, "but they were still children, and we killed children to save children." He finally turned to face them, and Lyrithes saw tears on his cheeks. That's the price, isn't it? To become the kind of people who can do what needs to be done, we have to become the kind of people who can live with what we've done. Admiral Chen sat down beside him. The day that stops bothering you is the day you become like them. The fact that it hurts means you're still human. Sometimes I wonder if that's enough, Reed said quietly. Lyra Thess found herself speaking before she realized it. On behalf of every child who will grow up free because of what you did, it is enough. It has to be enough. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Chen was on her feet immediately, her personal communicator crackling to life. Admiral, came the voice of her tactical officer. We have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy signature from the outer system. It appears to be some kind of Korth superweapon. They rushed to the bridge where the main display showed a construct unlike anything they had seen before. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and it pulsed with biomechanical energy that made their instruments scream warnings. It's a planet killer, Reed said, his voice hollow. They built a planet killer and aimed it at Zephyros Prime. Estimated time to target? Chen demanded. 18 hours at current velocity, the tactical officer replied. Admiral, our weapons can't penetrate that thing. It's too big, too heavily armored. Chen studied the display, her mind racing through possibilities. The weapon was indeed massive, its biomechanical construction providing both incredible destructive power and near immunity to conventional attack. There is one option, she said slowly. We can intercept it, use our ship's reactors to destabilize its power core. The explosion should be enough to destroy the weapon. And our fleet, Reed asked, though he already knew the answer, would be vaporized in the process. The bridge fell silent. 200 ships, 50,000 crew members, the entire human expeditionary force, gone in an instant to save a world they had never seen before this war began. Admiral, her communications officer said, we're receiving priority messages from the Zephyrian government. They're ordering us to retreat to save ourselves. Chen almost laughed. Of course they are. They still don't understand. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We have one last mission to complete. Any ship that wants to withdraw is free to do so. No questions asked, no judgment rendered. She waited. On the display, the fleet icons held their positions. Not a single ship moved toward the jump point. I guess that settles it, Reed said with a sad smile. Lyra stepped forward. Admiral, surely there must be another way. Some tactic, some strategy. Ambassador, Chen said gently. Sometimes the strategy is simply to pay the price. Your people called for aid and we came. We promised to protect you and we will keep that promise. She turned to her crew. All ships intercept course for the Korth weapon. Prepare for ramming speed. As the human fleet moved toward its final battle, Lyra Thess realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire species military force sacrificing itself completely for the sake of strangers. Why? She whispered. Admiral Chen heard her. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Because our children will judge us by what we do when no one is watching. Because the strong exist to protect the weak, not to exploit them. She paused, looking out at the stars one last time. And because when civilized people are threatened with extinction, someone has to be willing to become uncivilized to save them. The fleet moved toward the planet killer, carrying with it humanity's final gift to the galaxy, the knowledge that some things were worth any price. The human fleet approached the Korth planet killer like a swarm of angry wasps facing a mountain. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display as her ships moved into position around the massive bioweapon. She had expected this to be humanity's final hour, but the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the communication system from her laboratory deep in the ship. I think I have found something. The planet killer's bio-neural network has a weakness. Explain quickly, Doctor. We have 16 hours before it reaches Zephyros Prime. The weapon is using a modified version of the Korth hive mind technology, but scaled up to planetary size. If we can inject our neural virus directly into its core systems, we might be able to turn it against the Korth homeworlds instead. Chen felt a cold smile cross her face. You want to steal their planet killer and use it against them? Not steal, Admiral. Reprogram, make it think the real threat is behind it, not ahead of it. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of plan that had brought humanity this far. Do it, Chen ordered. All ships, new mission parameters. We're not destroying this thing, we're stealing it. The battle that followed would be remembered as the most audacious military operation in galactic history. Human ships swarmed around the planet killer like antibodies attacking a virus, their boarding pods cutting through bioarmor that could withstand planetary bombardment. Inside the weapon, human marines fought through corridors designed for creatures the size of buildings. The biomechanical systems tried to adapt to their presence, growing new defenses and weapons in real time. But humanity had spent months learning to think like the Korth, and now they turned that knowledge against their creators. Captain Reed led the assault on the weapon's central neural core, a chamber the size of a cathedral filled with pulsing bio-neural tissue. The organic computer that controlled the planet killer writhed and twisted as his team approached, its systems recognizing the threat but unable to comprehend the nature of the attack. Virus deployed, Dr. Vasquez reported from her remote position. Neural patterns are shifting. Admiral, it's working. The weapon is accepting our commands. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Chen watched as the massive construct began to slow its approach to Zephyros Prime. Slowly, majestically, the planet killer began to turn around. New target acquired. The tactical officer reported with amazement in his voice. It's aiming for the Korth core worlds. All ships withdraw to safe distance, Chen ordered. Let's see what their own weapon thinks of them. The planet killer accelerated toward Korth space, its biomechanical systems singing with redirected purpose. But Chen was not finished with her revenge. Communications. Open a channel to all Korth vessels in the system. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Korth command ship. The alien commander's compound eyes reflected shock and confusion as it tried to process what had happened. This is Admiral Chen of the human fleet, she said calmly. Your planet killer is now under our control. It will reach your homeworlds in approximately 72 hours. You have that long to surrender completely, or watch your own weapon destroy everything you have built. The Korth commander made chittering sounds that the translation software rendered as curses. You cannot control our biotechnology, Deathworlder. It will turn against you, will it? Chen smiled coldly. We've been fighting biological weapons since before your species left its homeworld. Every virus, every bacteria, every parasite on our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. You think your toys impress us? She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display shifted to show the planet killer's neural core. Dr. Vasquez stood among the pulsing bio-neural tissue, her hands moving over control interfaces that responded to her touch like trained pets. Your weapon obeys us now, Chen continued. Just like your ships obeyed us when we reprogrammed their neural networks. Just like your hive mind obeyed us when we introduced chaos into your collective consciousness. You are not the apex predators you believe yourselves to be. You are simply another biological system to be understood and controlled. The surrender came 6 hours later. Korth fleets across 3 sectors laid down their weapons and submitted to human oversight. The planet killer was turned away from populated worlds and sent into the outer darkness, its destructive power neutralized forever. The war was over, but victory brought new challenges. 3 months after the fall of the Korth hegemony, Ambassador Lyrathis stood once again before the Galactic Council. The chamber looked the same, but everything else had changed. Where once she had pleaded for help from peaceful species, now she faced beings who had been transformed by witnessing humanity's methods. The Terran fleet departs tomorrow, she announced. Admiral Chen has declared their mission complete. Good, said Counselor Thren, her insectoid features showing relief. We can return to civilized governance. Can we? Asked Minister Telvar. The Korth are gone, yes, but there are other threats in the galaxy, other species that see weakness in our peaceful ways. He was right, and they all knew it. The human intervention had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Predator species that had been held in check by the balance of power now saw opportunity in the chaos. Pirates, slavers, and worse were already moving to fill the vacuum left by the Korth defeat. What do you propose? Lyrathis asked. I propose we learn from our saviors, Telvar replied. The humans offered to share their military technologies, their tactical knowledge. Perhaps it is time we stop being victims. The debate that followed lasted for days. Half the council wanted to return to their peaceful ways, believing that humanity's methods were too dangerous to adopt. The other half argued that pacifism was a luxury they could no longer afford. In the end, It was the children who decided the matter. Young beings from across the Confederation came to testify before the council. Zephyrian crystals who had watched their parents die, aquatic youngsters who had been orphaned by bioweapons, insectoid larvae who had survived only because human medical teams arrived in time. They spoke with voices that carried the weight of experience no child should have. They had seen what happened when good people did nothing in the face of evil. They had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be prepared for war. "I want to serve on the new ships," announced Kelithes, a young Zephyrian whose parents had died in the first Korth attack. "I want to learn how to protect others the way the humans protected us." One by one, they all said the same thing. They wanted to join the new fleet that was being proposed. They wanted to learn from humanity's example. They wanted to make sure that no species would ever again face extinction, while the galaxy debated proper procedures. And so the Terran Memorial Fleet was born. The ships were a fusion of technologies: Zephyrian crystal matrices for communication, aquatic biofilters for life support, human weapons and tactics for combat effectiveness. They were crewed by volunteers from every species, united by a single purpose: to stand guard against the darkness. Ambassador Lyrithus commanded the first ship, the Unity. As she stood on its bridge watching the stars through viewports that had been designed to human specifications, she thought about the strange turns that fate could take. A year ago, she had been a diplomat in a peaceful confederation, believing that all conflicts could be resolved through negotiation. Today she was a military commander of a warship designed to fight and win against any threat. "Ambassador," her communications officer announced, "we're receiving a message from Admiral Chen." The human's face appeared on the main screen, transmitted from the bridge of the Indomitable as it prepared to jump back to Earth. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had completed a difficult but necessary task. "Ambassador Lyrithus," Chen said with a smile, "I wanted to congratulate you on your new command. The Unity is a beautiful ship. Thank you, Admiral. Your people's contributions to its design were essential. I hope you never have to use them. But if you do, remember what we taught you. The strong exist to protect the weak. Never let anyone convince you that strength and compassion cannot coexist." "What will your people do now?" Lyrithus asked. Chen's expression grew distant. "We go home. We tend our gardens and raise our children and hope that the galaxy has learned what we came to teach. But we will be watching. And if someone else decides to threaten peaceful species..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "The universe is a dangerous place," Chen continued, "but it is also beautiful and worth protecting. You understand that now. Make sure your children understand it too." The transmission ended and the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, returning to their death world to await the next crisis that would require their terrible efficiency. Lyrithus stood on the bridge of the Unity, surrounded by beings who had learned to be warriors in the cause of peace. Outside, the stars beckoned with infinite possibility and infinite danger. Behind them, the memorial wall in the ship's central corridor bore names from 100 worlds, those who had died so that others might live. At the bottom, in simple letters that somehow managed to convey both humility and determination, were the words that had become the fleet's motto: "We stand watch, so others may dream."